Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another one of our Facebook Live sessions. And today we have one of our family of services. We have the Harvey Unasium Hope Center, and today we have Rosemary Coates, and she's going to be touching up on a topic. Um, as you guys might know, we've been doing Foster Care Awareness Month, and we've been doing on Wednesdays. We've been doing Lunch with Leisha, and we are definitely touching up on different types of information, different topics on foster care. And so, on another note, it's also Mental Health Awareness Month. And so, of course, that's a great way to tie in our Hope Center and our Hope Center services into Mental Health Awareness Month. So, we decided to also do a Facebook Live session with our Hope Center team. And today we have Rosemary Coates. She's the Senior Clinical Director for the Hope Center. Would you like to say hello, Rosemary?
Hello, everybody.
And so Rosemary is with us today, and then we will be continuing once a week, the next couple of weeks, with the rest of two of her other teammates that will be coming on and doing another Facebook Live session. And so, we will be doing 3 different topics in these next 3 weeks, today being the first one. And, we would hopefully provide answers to questions that you may have about mental health and wellness. And so if any of you out there have any questions or need any information, of course, you can always reach out to us here at the Hope Center with Rosemary Coates and her team. And also, if you want to message while we're having this dialogue in this session today, you can also chat on there and ask any questions. We'll do our best to answer those. And if not, if you want to ask those questions after, this feed will be up and this video will be up on all our social media. So if it's not something that you can think of today, or maybe it's something that you want to ask or have any thought about later, we will gladly get back to you as well. But thank you, all of you out there who are continuously supporting the Children's Shelter, the Family of Services, and all our family strengthening programs. We are blessed to be able to provide these services to the community. And so I think we will go ahead and start our conversation and our dialogue today. So I know that, go ahead, Miss Rosemary.
Oh, no, I just wanted to let people know that it's a team. There, we have 5 therapists and 4 social workers, and we have our wonderful office staff who really get everything going here at the Hope Center. We do work well together. We like each other. So I think that's helpful, especially when we're providing outpatient mental health services to the community. So you'll notice it when they come in.
Yes. So the Hope Center was created to provide trauma-specific therapy services for children aged 2.5 through adults who have experienced one or more traumas, which impacts their lives or their lives of their families. So I guess we'll just start in a nutshell. What is trauma?
Well, trauma can be described as an emotional response to usually a terrible event. And that can be like an accident, it could be a rape, or it could be a natural disaster. And right after, immediately after the event, shock or denial are very typical. And then longer term reactions can include some unpredictable emotions. Some of the kids that we work with have what they call flashbacks, and they're remembering a time that happened a long time ago, but they're having flashbacks, and they describe those. And then there are also things that strain relationships. There's enough of the trauma that bothers the interrelational conversations and discussions. And then there can also be physical symptoms like headaches and nausea. Those are all the feelings that are quite normal. And some people do have difficulty moving on with their lives after a traumatic event. And when I'm working with children, I usually tell them something like a trauma to go to the dentist. And the dentists have asked me not to say that. But it's a good example of a small trauma that can happen, or something more serious where you're having to deal with a family illness.
And so then maybe that can lead us into the care, right? So maybe we can focus a little bit on what is trauma-informed care.
Sure. Well, the Hope Center uses trauma-informed care, which basically is an approach. It's how we provide a service or deliver the recognition that a trauma is prevalent. And prevalence, every person that walks the earth has had some type of trauma. And some people have experienced mental illness as a result, and it can be traumatic, even trying to get treatment and care. which can sometimes build fear. And so what we try with the trauma-informed care is to say that there is no risk of harm while they're with us, even though they might have that experience from outside, and that the care is provided individually, and we do deliver it in a very sensitive manner. And this is to help prevent future harm. And I think with the number of people that we've seen over time is that their trauma experiences are unique to themselves, but they're understood by many because they've happened to the individuals over generations. So the types of trauma that they might experience, of course, are the ones most notified by us as physical, verbal, and emotional abuse. And what we've been hearing a lot about is the sexual abuse. There are subtypes of trauma as well. And all of these impact individuals and their families. And it's astounding when you ask a person to tell a story, how many people have experienced various traumas through their life's journey.
And so everybody's traumas can, I guess people kind of maybe it shows in different ways, right? Like it's just some people react to it differently, or it affects them in different ways, and it's just an emotional. It just depends on person to person, right?
Exactly, and families too. I think we like if I think about my family was a very small family, but the major trauma was when somebody became ill, and then the whole family would rally around it, and so that person who was traumatized by their illness didn't realize that they caused trauma to the family. So we have secondary trauma that results from something that could be very scary for one, but it involves many.
So who benefits from the trauma-informed care?
Well, anyone who has had a trauma, small or large, there's no limit to how many traumas. You might have multiple traumas as well, but people who have experienced it benefit from coming to therapy. And also that could include their families, which could be extended family, could be grandparents. And what we've noticed is that the grandparents benefit from trauma-informed so that they can help work with their children. And they become caregivers a lot of time for the family. I know, Ernesto, that we had some people on before that talked about what it's like to be grandparents caring for grandchildren. And here at the Hope Center, we've actually had great-grandparents who are taking care of their great-grandchildren. And we have grandparents, we have great-grandparents, we have children and grandchildren all living in the houses together, all at one house.
Wow. And the family culture plays a role?
It does. It does. And I think within each of our histories, we have different secrets or family issues that may have come up from the family members. For instance, we had probably a 75-year-old gentleman. I'm just going to take a drink real quick. I always do this when I talk long. And he was about 75 years old, and he was trying to explain to his grandson about the war that he came from. And his grandson started having nightmares about the story that the grandfather had told. And so the family then decided that nobody was going to talk about the past. Well, that can inhibit some of the things that the kids might need to know. So I think we have to find a balance regarding, sorry, y'all, regarding how much information a child does know, but also the history. And that's part of the family culture. Things are taboo to some kids. Sorry, y'all.
So also, like you mentioned, like the upbringing of children, right, regarding discipline, communication, authority, and performance.
Exactly. And performance expectations, especially if the bar is set too high for the child or the children, then that can cause trauma for them as well. Sorry.
Oh, you're fine. You're fine. Talking to I wish I had my water bottle with me.
Well,
I drink the water.
Well, so, I appreciate having water, but I'm not going to do the big bottle. I just have my diet. But so people use the word trauma, and I think what we have come to know or recognize over this past year is trauma. And we had COVID-19, of course, that took a huge chunk out of America and out of families and put through families together that might not otherwise all be there. we had the giant freeze that poor Texas has suffered, which I think it was 1 in 100 years that happened, and that was traumatic. We have children removed from schools that used to be in school, and they're not with friends. And so we've also had a lot of increase in the number of children that are harmed from physical violence in the home as a result of having everybody in the house at the same time. And so because each of those people are, quote, survivors, they might pass on those stories about what happened to them during this last year of 2020, 2021. So those stories that they'll start saying, then subsequent generations are going to know what happened. I think for a long time, we're going to be telling stories about this past year and the epidemic.
Absolutely. I mean, this definitely left a good mark on a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
So I know you earlier, when you started mentioning this specific trauma with the COVID and how do we move forward? But one trauma that I'm kind of familiar with, and maybe this one's the one that I was hoping you can touch up on a little bit, is the intergenerational trauma.
Yes. Now, we are lucky in San Antonio to have families that are multi-generational, meaning that you have the grandparents, the parents, and the children living in the same home. And we also have those stories that I mentioned earlier that are told by the family. But there could be bad things that happen to the grandparent who bestowed upon his son, I'll just say son, a family violence, and then that son handed it down to his family and experienced family violence with them. And so it's almost like it's intergenerational negative trauma, and that each of the generations are stuck. They don't know what they need to do to get out of it. And when they experience that type of trauma, it's also kept secret from the rest of the families or other friends and support people that they could reach out to. The intergenerational trauma is something that is relatively a new phrase, but it's been happening for the eternity as far as the experiences. We're just now being able to recognize it and have people talk about it. And if you sit and think about old wives' tales, some of those things weren't wives' tales. Those were really events that happened.
Wow. And so I'm something that I'm pretty familiar with when it comes to the intergenerational trauma, and you hit it right on the money. We had our grandparents, and then my mom and dad, and then us all living together in one house.
Mm-hmm.
And then just fighting, especially when I was younger. And I'm blessed and grateful that I'm here now and I was able to achieve the things that I've achieved. But when I was younger, I remember, we were living in a small little town in Mexico, and not very many resources, and there, the idea of poverty and not having what others had, and then not just the way we were treated, but the way my parents were made to feel, and then all these emotions and feelings are passed down because, and at some point you get to this place, and like I said, I'm very blessed and grateful that my parents, it was much later on in life, but they did get a chance to really explain and let us really understand what led us to where we are now, and I think that was part of my healing. Of course, like I said, I was a lot older, but it still really helped in the healing process.
Oh yeah, and even now, I mean, with people, if someone has a chance to address those issues, they may change the behaviors for the future. I'm just going to say this, it's going to be insensitive for just a moment, and then it'll come back and it'll make sense. And you may have heard the story before where this one woman was watched by her daughter. She got a roast. She got the roast out. She put it on the counter. She cut both ends off and she put it in the pan and then she baked it. And the daughter saw her mom doing that. She said, "Mom, why do you cut off the ends of the pot roast like that? Why are you doing that?" And the daughter or her mother says, "Well, that's just the way my mother did it." So the little girl decides, "I'm going to go ask Grandma, why do we always cut off the ends of the roast?" And the grandma says, "Because it didn't fit in my pan." And so something had started and remained not known why people did it, but it was from something that was ironic or in the past, and that people continue to perseverate it. So I think sometimes, if you have a chance to ask questions like yourselves, if you have a situation and over time you've noticed it's destructive type of behavior, then maybe it's normalized. Oh, that's just grandpa. That's just how she is, or that's just how he is, or that's Uncle Dave. But actually, it affects the next generation because they might suffer from that same sequence of events. And so I think that with domestic violence, especially, that it's time to step back and kind of look at why are we doing these things and have discussions, which a lot of people are afraid to do.
Yes.
We've also had a history of sexual assaults that have happened that have gone undiscussed, but that's just the way it was too, where we want the people who've experienced that trauma to speak about that. And hopefully any therapist or any pastoral counseling or friends or agencies can assist in that. But just to be able to start talking about it, I think is important. So I know you were going to say something. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No. I was just about who might experience intergenerational trauma.
Right. Well, and even in small families, like a couple of families that are very small, they move from one country to another. They're together. They don't have any choice but be together. That's what they want. And we have a lot of refugees that are coming to America who need assistance, and yet coming here was very traumatic for them. Issues that you wouldn't even want to discuss. But if they don't talk about it and get some help as soon as they can, then they're going to carry that trauma with them for the rest of forever.
Yeah, I experiencing us migrating back and forth from Mexico and, coming to the border and coming back and going back across the border. And, I remember for a time period, very specific time period when I was a child, not knowing the idea of what being grounded was, right? Like, because you never knew, like, we never knew, like, in this month we were here, in the next couple months we might be over here, and then going back. So it was not having this almost sense of like rooted or grounded place, because I would see others would, and I know that affected us, especially all my brothers, my siblings, affected us emotionally.
Sure. Well, you're seeking some kind of stability, just knowing that you're in a safe place, that you know what's going to happen next. Because everyone is susceptible, by the way, to generational trauma. There's no specific population that are more vulnerable, but in history, it shows those people that are, like you're just describing, you and your family, they are the most vulnerable. They are the ones that may experience more trauma related to being exploited, or having repeated and continual abuse, or racism, or the poverty that you discussed. And it's a trauma in itself, but when you combine it all together, it can be a particularly hard hitting with those families who have little to nothing.
And so how does this happen?
Well,
in a very
so remember I told you I was going to go off on the roast. I'm going to come back to that the family healing occurs with all the generations healing. So if you think about what really is supposed to happen in a family, it's wonderful to think about that. Ideally, children are nurtured and they're supported and they're encouraged and they're positively reinforced. Their mental health is based on the mirror of their family's mental health. So if you have a healthy mother, healthy father, they're raising the children. And in the very first years of their lives, basically until they go to school, they're with that parent, that group at home. And then they go and they get to experience the world outside of their parents. And if you have a family that has alcoholic or substance abuse and is going with one or more parent, it disrupts that mental wellness for the child, and it disrupts the regulation of the child's life, structure, support, nurturing, caring. And then you might come up with the child who becomes so disillusioned and disappointed that they become withdrawn, depressed, suicidal, run away, experience drugs, get with the wrong people. And so it all goes back down to those forming years when they need nurturing the most. And if you think about that, how important that family is, I think that's one of the things we do here at the Hope Center, but within our agency, is that the value of everybody's life, no matter how young, no matter how old, and that their perspective and their reception to receiving things sometimes changes, and that some people want a hand, other people don't want our hand, but we're already ready to reach out and try to help out. I think with most of our past year, those experiences that I shared have been up and down for families because of the life that was expected of us to stay home. And now we're beginning to smile more. I can't tell, but I can tell by the eyes with the masks of people pulling themselves away from that dark time, if you will, and looking for the hope in the future.
Mm. So, on as far as the Hope Center and the services that are provided, what can be done to help a family member or family?
Well, depending on however the degree of dysfunction was, everybody can. If I answer your question poorly, I apologize.
No. It's a very general question, though.
Right. Well, so the therapy services come in different flavors depending on the age. And when I say that, you might have a child who's acting out very badly, really struggling within the home. Parenting has something to do with that. But mom or dad just need help with the kiddo who's acting out. It may have something to do with trauma or just behavior. And so we have a program that's parent-child interactive therapy. We also provide in-home therapy services, support services from the staff that go into the home and work with the family. And I think that combo with the therapist doing the work with the child and the support the parent receives, they can change the behaviors. Hopefully not have traumas experienced by a child having temper tantrums in the middle of church or the grocery store, but basically helping the child to better understand how to behave. And I think it also affects the physical health, the brain development of a child if they're structured enough that they learn a response each time is going to be the same by a parent. Young children who are surrounded by love and endearment, they tend to love and endear animals and take good care of their things rather than being destructive and angry. And not all children are the same. Every child is different. When children grow up and they've been in that vulnerable population we talked about, they're more likely to repeat the patterns that they learned that were negative. And what we're really hoping to do within the Hope Center is get them to turn those around and make the patterns of life be more positive, especially to make their childhood better. And taking the dysfunction and making it functional so that they can get the needs they have and be happy with getting the support from family.
That's great. That's really, really great. And so you guys provide individual therapy and group family therapy, right?
We do individual and family, and sometimes it's not all at the same time. We may have to work with the child for a period of time, working with the parent at a time, and then join them together. And we have teenagers. Teenagers don't always want their parent involved, but we do work with the family as needed, especially if the parents have been separated from the children for whatever reason, and they're going to reunify. Those things are very important as well.
So it's good that I see the great services that you guys are providing. You know, when it's I know that it's culturally sensitive and holistic, and like you said, I'm glad that we're talking about it in this way, because I still think that there's a lot of stigma behind mental health. You know, but I know that the COVID really, the environment that we've been living in for a little bit over a year has kind of really brought that out more into. In the last couple of years, I know it's been out more into the mainstream, and being able to talk about, you know, mental health issues, and that's a really great thing, because the more we destigmatize it, the more we know people, the less shame there is out there, the more people are willing to come out and really move forward and find those ways to heal, you know.
Right. And I think too, you know, when we're talking about, there's no specific thing that happens that causes the person to behave a certain way, but it certainly is helpful to know what their beliefs were, what the patterns are, and then what may be ingrained in them. And often the caregivers cause the trauma themselves because they're trying to make their kids be better. And so we try to have healthy parent-child relationships. And what that looks like is, you know, it's not a television show, it's real life. It's just being supportive and consistent, helping the child to learn and to learn from and imitate the positive parent. And likewise, the parallel process is the children learning to improve their behaviors while their caregivers learn better parenting. And that works to help out both parties. The family goes away happy, at least. We hope they do.
Oh, that's great. Well, thank you so much, Rosemary. I appreciate you sharing this information. the work that's being done at our Hope Center. Any final words, Les? Any conclusion?
Well, we could have talked. I think we could have continued talking for another hour, but for a conclusion, although intergenerational trauma is an enormous challenge, we can end up on a hopeful note, and that is the concept that the family unit has existed as long as human beings have, and that we now embrace all sorts of family units beyond the traditional nuclear family. And with research, it indicates that love beats all when it comes down to raising children.
Ah, those are great closing words.
Thank you.
Well, I'm again, for those of you out there, this is a Mental Health Awareness Month. There are ways that you can help put this out into the community. Talk to your family members, your friends, spread awareness, especially through social media, whether there's resources. And for any of you out there who want more information, there's lots of information and resources online. Please do use the hashtag mental health awareness and sharing stories and resources, because again, the more we have this out in the open and its existence into our community, the more that we know we can be there for other people so that they can take those steps that they need to find whatever is going to work for them and looking for this type of healing, right? It is Mental Health Awareness Month. So thank you guys so much, Miss Rosemary. It's a pleasure always talking to you. You've always soaking up the knowledge that you and your amazing experience that you have, and I appreciate you very much. And thank you for the work that you do in the community. And again, for those of you out there, we really appreciate you guys tuning in. And remember, we will be back tomorrow at noon. So tune in tomorrow. We will have Delisha Nolan, who is our foster care recruiter, and she will again continue the dialogue and talk a little bit more about our foster care program and during this Foster Care Awareness Month as well. Everyone have a wonderful afternoon, and we'll talk to you guys very soon. Thank you.